Well, welcome to week 2 of our series, Detours. I love this series because we're just asking the question, how do we handle the unexpected changes along life's way? How do we handle the moment that we think life's going to be going this way and all of a sudden it's like, curveball, here we go, we're going in this direction now. How do we handle detours well? And if you're newer around here, newer around LCBC, there's something about our church that I want you to know. For us, we believe that we're all on a journey. So we all have our birthday. We all then have a certain amount of time that we live. Some of us, we don't get enough time. Some of us get way too much time. You're past your expiration date. You know who you are. And so some of us get a lot of life. Some of us don't get enough life. But we believe that depending upon how you respond to Jesus in this life, upon his invitation to trust and follow him, that determines what happens after your death date. And for those of us who trust and follow Jesus, then we get to trust and follow Jesus into heaven. But for those of us who we kind of pull a Burger King and we want it our way and we think our way is the best way, then we will spend eternity in a place that we get it our way, which the Bible calls hell. But whether you believe in Jesus or not, whether you're a Christian or not, a follower of Jesus or not, we believe that life is full of a series of ups and downs. We believe you make the team, you miss the shot. She flirts with you, she breaks your heart. You get the job, you lose the job. You get the scholarship, you fail the class. She says yes to marriage, marriage is hard. You have kids, and well, you have kids. And for us as a church, we believe that Jesus changes your eternity, but we also believe that Jesus, from wherever you start to trust and follow him, doesn't take you out of the ups and downs, but he takes you through the ups and downs. And so we're just asking the question of, in these ups and downs and in these detours, how do we detour well? How do we manage this life well? If we're promised to have ups and downs, how do we handle them well? So a couple of months ago, David asked for me to reserve this weekend for teaching, and I was really excited to do that. Well, then fast forward, and it was a couple of weeks later, and it was one of those weeks that I felt like I was ahead of the curveball, like I was ahead of the game, and so I was like, I'm gonna finish my work week with a little treat to me. And so I decided I was gonna go to Barnes & Noble, and for any of you who've ever worked at the Barnes & Noble Cafe, you might know their Reese's chocolate giant cookies. They got a cookie that's about the size of your face, and it is just amazing. And I was like, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee, and I'm gonna get a giant cookie, and I'm just gonna end my work week on a really sugar high, and it's gonna be great. So I'm sitting at Barnes & Noble, I've got my laptop out, I'm doing some emails, I got my giant cookie, I got my cup of coffee, and it's just great. And then out of the blue, I get a text message from David. Now, David and I do not text. Our senior pastor and I do not text. We don't have like a pen pal relationship. That's not how we communicate. But all of a sudden, I get this text message from David, and David just says, hey, could we have breakfast on Monday? And my first thought is, we usually fire people on Fridays, so I think that's safe. I think I can do that. Yes, we can do breakfast on Monday. Little did I know, setting aside this weekend to teach and going into that breakfast, David was about to invite me into one of the wildest detours of my life. Over that breakfast, David just goes, hey, last 4 years you've been at Berks, you've loved Berks campus, God's done incredible things at Berks campus, but we want to invite you to step from the Berks campus to the West Shore campus. And that will mean selling the house you love and leaving the friends you became family with, leaving a campus that you've gone through the trenches with, relocating your kids in school. We want to invite you to consider just a small little major life detour. And I was like, I can tell you what my wife's going to say. Well, Pearl and I prayed about it, and we talked about it, and it was one of those crazy moments when we just felt like God was saying, this is right. And so little did I know that this weekend, teaching about detours, I would be in the midst of one of the biggest detours of my life. On Christmas this last year, we let our boys unwrap their gifts, and then at 1 o'clock on Christmas Day, we're like, box them up, we're moving tomorrow. And so on the 26th, we moved over to the West Shore, and this coming Sunday, next Sunday, we actually launch the West Shore campus over in Harrisburg, and we're super excited about that. It's crazy to think about what God's gonna do there. And if you're currently here, stay at the campus that you're at. We're wanting all of the visitors and all the first-time people in the West Shore to come to the campus. You're all invited in April or May. But we are just thrilled that that's opening next weekend. But I'm in the middle of this huge detour. And it just made me laugh whenever I heard that this weekend was about detours. It's like God just leaned over and slapped me upside the head and was like, this one's for you, buddy. Because the question of how do we detour well is intensely personal right now. How we detour well really matters to me right now because the people on my journey with me, my wife, my boys, my friends, campuses, and people that I love, it matters that I detour well. And I've been reminded that it matters for all of us, that we detour well because the people in our lives matter. So for you, your detour may not be a move. Your detour might be an illness. You didn't see it coming. You didn't invite it, you don't like it, but you're in the middle of it. It could be the pregnancy that you've been hoping for, or the pregnancy that you're surprised by. It could be a death you wasn't expecting, an opportunity gained, an opportunity lost, a romance gained, a romance lost, that accident. A lot of us are in our own detours. Some detours that are ultimately good detours, some detours that are terrifying detours, but it matters how we navigate the detours because the people in our lives matter. And we want to detour well because the people in our lives, we want to love well. And so, as I've been thinking about this weekend, there's been this one simple truth that has just been resonating with me. And to me, it's kind of what I want you to think about. The second you feel your inertia changing for a detour coming, and the second you feel the shift, the second you feel the change, I want you to remember this statement, and I want you to kind of take a time out and remember what I'm about to say. And it's a silly statement, and it's full of D's, and you might think it's dumb, but I hope it makes you remember it. And it is, detours determine the direction of our days. Detours determine the direction of our days. If there was one sentence from all of today that you remember, is detours determine the direction of our days. Detours determine the direction of our days. And I want you, as soon as you feel a detour coming, to just pause and say, okay, detours determine the direction of our days. So how do we detour well? How do we detour well? I love reading the Bible. And there's times that I open up the Bible and I just feel like God's like, this is exactly what you're supposed to do. And there's sometimes I open the Bible and he's like, here's a story for you to learn from. And there's a story in the Bible that I just think drives home this truth that detours determine the direction of our days. And it's the story of a young man whose father dies. And so he's in the midst of grief, but his father also happened to be king. So he's in the midst of grief and figuring out what it means to become a leader and be in charge. But he wasn't following just any king. See, his granddaddy was King David. And King David is like the most famous king in all of Israel's history. It's David versus Goliath. It's the David who has a 17-foot naked statue of himself in Italy. It's the David that we all know about today. That King David, it's his grandson. Well, he's also following his daddy, who is Solomon, who is heralded as the most wise man on earth. Solomon, who wrote books that are in our Bible, like Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon. That guy, the guy who's famous for building temples and palaces. Solomon, the wisest man on the earth. That's who he's following. And so there's this young man thrown into a detour who he's got to walk in the shadow of King David. He's got to walk in the footsteps of King Solomon. And I can't imagine what it's like for him to be thrown into this detour and have to figure out, how do I follow them? How do I lead after them? How do I step into this detour and detour well? Well, I love that we get to read his story. And so I want you guys to turn to 1 Kings chapter 11. It's on page 270 at the Bibles in your seat, or you can find it on your phones. 1 King chapter 11, we're going to start in verse 40. It's in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is leading us to Jesus, and so it's kind of laying the foundation for Jesus to come on the scene a couple of years later. And so 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 40 on page 270 at the Bible at our seats. And this is a story that illustrates how detours determine the direction of our days. And so how do we detour well? So here's where we pick up the story. Solomon, the King Rehoboam's son, the young man's dad, Solomon tried to kill Jeroboam. Jeroboam is a name that you'll see later. So Solomon tries to kill Jeroboam. But he fled to King, I don't know how to pronounce that, Shakira, I guess, of Egypt, and stayed there until Solomon died. The rest of the events of Solomon's reign, and including all his deeds and his wisdom, are recorded in the book of Acts of Solomon. Solomon ruled in Jerusalem for in Jerusalem over all Israel for 40 years. When he died, he was buried in the city of David, named for his father. Then his son Rehoboam became the next king. Rehoboam went to Shechem, where all of Israel had gathered to make him king. When Jeroboam, the guy who had fled to Egypt because Solomon was trying to kill him, the son of Nebat, heard of this, he returned from Egypt, for he had fled to Egypt to escape from King Solomon. The leaders of Israel summoned him, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. Detours determine the direction of our days, and Rehoboam is thrown into this detour. And the first thing that we learn from reading his story, and this might be like a no-duh statement. It might be something that many of us just gloss over in our reading. It's something that I think many of us don't actually pay attention to when we're in our own detours. But it's the simple fact that detours are hard. Detours are hard. See, in the midst of this detour, right in his grief, right in his transition, that guy shows up. The guy who his dad tried to kill, the guy that his dad was like, you're an enemy of the state, that guy shows up. And all of a sudden, in the midst of the detour, in the midst of the transition, the challenge is there. The guy saying, we've got to talk. I can't imagine being Rehoboam and having my own guilt or my own grief, having my own insecurities, having my own fears. And then all of a sudden, I got to face that guy and that guy showing up. Detours are hard. And if detours determine the direction of our days, we just have to expect the challenge. We have to expect challenges in the middle of a detour. If detours determine the direction of our days, we've got to expect the challenge. And I just want to give all of us permission who are in detours to simply say, it's hard. It's a challenge. I'm facing something right now. This has brought stuff out of the woodwork in my family. This has brought up insecurities I didn't know was there. This has made in-laws all become outlaws. This has caused things to happen that I don't know how to handle. Detours bring challenges. They get hard. I mean, every change it brings friction and tension, and it brings things that we don't know about ourselves and about our families. And here's Rehoboam in the midst of his detour, and the challenger shows up. And he's got to decide, does he back out or check out or wimp out, or can he be faithful throughout in the midst of his challenger? And this story reminded me of a season in my own life. A couple of years ago, I decided I was going to act like I was 18 again, so my friends got together and played basketball. And do you know that sound on Thanksgiving whenever you grab the turkey leg and you like rip it off the turkey and all the like popping and crackling and the tendons and snapping? You know that sound? Well, as I showed off my beautiful layup skills, my body made that sound. It shouldn't make that sound. And I thought on the way up, I was like, that's not going to be good. Then when I landed, I'm like, that's excruciatingly painful. And I realized that I had just pretty much destroyed my entire left knee, like just blew it up. I don't know what I did, but it was just like the trifecta of everything in there destroyed. And so I was non-load bearing for like 20 weeks, had to do tons of rehab, had to have surgery. It was just a wild ride recovering from this blown ACL and just destroyed knee. Well, in the midst of coming out of all the drugs and coming out of all the rehab and coming out of all the surgeries, I decided now is the time to fulfill my bucket list. I'm going to run a marathon. It's a great idea. You're only 70 pounds overweight, you have absolutely no lung capacity, and you only have one good knee. This is exactly what you need in life right now, Matt. You need to sign up to run a marathon. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, I'm going to do it. It must have been the drugs. But I committed to running a marathon, and then a moment of no shame, I Google flattest marathon on the East Coast. That's the one I signed up for. My goal was not to run fast, it was just to not die. And so I sign up for this marathon, and I decide I'm going to do this thing. So I start training, I start talking to people, I figure out what type of shoes I need to be wearing, I figure out what Body Glide is, the struggle's real, I figure out how many calories per hour I need to be eating because I knew I would be out there for hours on end because I'm so slow. So how do I do the food thing? And I figured out all this stuff. I slowly started training. I finally got to race day, and I was ready to go to the race. And I had a couple of guys coaching me along the way, and one of the guys, he said, hey, in the race, you're going to come into what they call the pain cave. And I'm like, all right. And he said the pain cave is whenever your body switches from burning on sugars to fats or muscle or brain cells. Whatever your body can eat, it will. So just get ready for it. And I'm like, is that a good thing? And he goes, oh, no, it feels terrible, but you'll know you're in it. And the trick is just go through it. And I'm like, pain cave, Awesome, so excited. Okay, good. So we get to the race, we start running, and it was just a beautiful day. I had a great team to run with. My friends were there. We found a pacer. It was beautiful. Everything was going amazing until it wasn't. Sure enough, mile 19, it feels like my body starts eating itself. And all of a sudden, my head gets cloudy, and everything starts cramping, and there's not enough body glide in the world to make me not want to punch my mom. It was awful, guys. It was awful. And I am just in the middle of being like, you are the dumbest human being on the face of the planet. What are you thinking? You're fat. You're out of shape. You should not be doing this. Why are you running a marathon? And I just was like beating myself up. I was like, this is a terrible life choice. And I came over this little hill, and I saw my wife, and I saw my friends, and I instantly just started like weeping, like snot out the nose, totally beside myself. And I'm like, that does not look like you sweat from there. I'm like, what am I doing? And I finally get to my friends, and they can tell I'm done. They can tell I'm hurting. They can tell that I am in the midst of the pain cave. And so like no one talks to me. They just like start putting water in my backpack and like handing me food like they're feeding like a hurt animal. And the only person who could talk to me was my wife. And my wife stepped up to me. And my wife's a very caring person. She's a very loving person, but she was not in this moment. And she grabs my shoulders. She grabs my vest. And she looks at me and she goes, you are strong. And you are able, and you can do this. You are strong, you are able, and you can do this. You are strong, you are able, and you can do this. You're in the pain cave, suck it up and run. You are strong, you are able, you can do this. Now start running. And I was like, here we go. And I started running, and I finished the race. And I want some of you to know right now, you're on a detour, and detours are hard, and you're in a challenge, and you're in your pain cave, and I want you to know you are strong, and you are able, and you can do this. You are strong, you are able, and you can do this. You are strong, and you are able, and you can do this. And some of you are going to say, but Matt, you don't know how hard it is. You don't know how long it's been. You don't know the weight of the anxiety and the fears and the finances. You don't know how terrible the divorce is. You don't know how sad it is. You don't know what I'm facing, and I don't. But what I do know is that Jesus steps in. He says, when you are weak, I am strong. When you're not able, I am able. When you can't, I can. What I know is in the middle of your pain cave, in the middle of your detour, don't you dare wimp out and don't you dare back out, because Jesus is saying, I got your shoulders. Let's do it together. You are strong in me. You are able in me. We can do this together. So keep running the race. Keep moving forward. Don't wimp out, because Christ in you makes you strong enough. Christ in you makes you able. Christ in you says you can keep going. We got a God who says you can do all things through me who gives you strength. We got a God who says you're able to do infinitely more than you can think or imagine. We got a God who says I didn't give you a spirit of fear and timidity, but a power and love and self-discipline. So you're in the cave. Take a deep breath. Christ is with you, and you are strong, and you are able, and you can do this. You can make it through the divorce. You can make it through the finances. You can make it through the struggles. You can make it through raising your kids. You can make it through this tension. You can make it because Christ in you is enough. Detours are hard. Expect the challenge. But know that there's a God who's throwing his arms around you and saying, let's do it together. Let's do it together. Let's do it together. Detours determine the direction of our days. So expect a challenge. Expect a struggle. Expect a pain cave. That's okay. But also know that there's a God who says, let's go. I'm in it with you. You're not alone. Because together we're strong enough. Together we're able. Together we can do this. So Rehoboam sees his struggle. He sees his challenge. And he steps in. And so in verse 3, he steps up to the challenger. And it says, the leaders of Israel summoned him, and Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel went to speak with Rehoboam. Your father was a hard master, they said. Lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us. Then we will be your loyal subjects. Rehoboam replied, give me 3 days to think this over. Then come back for my answer. So the people went away. Detours determine the direction of our days. So expect a challenge, but also expect to have to make wise choices, big choices. People will call you out and say, you need to answer this. You need to make a decision. What are we gonna do? Where are we gonna go? What are you gonna choose? The wait's gonna come in the middle of your detour and you've gotta make a decision. So what are you gonna do? And I love how Rehoboam starts right here. He sees the question and he's like, whoa, time out. Let me think. Give me 3 days. And I can't help but imagine that in this moment, as Rehoboam has to make one of the biggest decisions of his life, that the words of his dad aren't coming back. I mean, his dad wrote Proverbs, and so I imagine he's got these Proverbs in his head. Without wise leaders, a nation falls. There is safety in having many advisors. Or possibly he was thinking, fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. Or maybe he remembered pride leads to conflict. Those who take advice are wise. Or possibly he was thinking, walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. So here he is. He stepped into the challenge. He sees he's got to make a wise choice. And so he turns to the wise men in his life. And so we read in verse 6, then King Rehoboam discussed the matter with the older men who had counseled his father Solomon. What is your advice, he asked. How should I answer these people? The older counselors replied, if you are willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subject. He makes a great move. Calls a timeout. He goes to the advisors that the wisest man in the history of the world chose. And he says, help me figure this out. Help me figure out how to make a wise choice right now. But here's what's dangerous about detours. And here's what we've got to remember. In a detour, our emotions, our fears, our worries, our insecurities, our doubts, our troubles, all of those things start raging inside of us. And all of a sudden, you can be hearing the wisest, best advice in the world, but all of a sudden, what's going on inside of our heads, what's going on inside of our hearts, the fear that rages inside of us because of the uncertainty of the season can make us all of a sudden be like, no, I don't want that wisdom. Can I trust that? Is that good? Are you really for me? Or are you against me? And our fears and our emotions can cause us to doubt the best people in our lives. And Rehoboam sadly falls for that trap. It's like watching a quarterback in the middle of a game get rattled, and instead of calling a timeout and talking to his coach, trying to force a play, turning the ball over, and losing the game. Rehoboam could have listened to the wise counsels in front of him, but instead, his fears and his anxieties and his worries kicked in, and the next thing he knows, he's like, I don't know, that doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel right, what do I do? And he turns to find someone to tell him what he wants to hear. He turns to someone, he says, I don't like that advice, I want a different advice. And he kept asking other people till he found what he wanted to hear. And so we read in verse 8 that Rehoboam rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the young men who had grown up with him and were now his advisors. What is your advice, he asked them. How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed by my father? The young men replied, This is what you should tell those complainers who want a lighter burden. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I'm going to beat you with scorpions. Rehoboam knew he had to make a big decision. He sought wise counsel. But all of a sudden, his fears and his worries and his anxiety and maybe his ambition and trying to prove how big his little finger was, all of that kicked in. And next thing he knows, he's not thinking straight. And he went till he found someone who would give him what he wants to hear. Side note, you will find somebody to affirm your dumb idea. There's enough people in this world who will tell you that's a great idea when it is not a great idea. And so if you're wanting to do something dumb, somebody will say it's great. And Rehoboam left wisdom. And he listened to the unproven, and he listened to the naive, and he listened to the people who didn't have his best interest in mind. And he rejected wisdom, he followed them, and sadly, Rehoboam is now a famous king. Not famous like his grandfather who built a nation, or famous like his father who just oozed wisdom. He's famous for his how he naively threw away wisdom and led the nation to civil war. See, he said to the nation exactly what the young men said, and then this is what the nation said back to him. When all of Israel realized that the king had refused to listen to them, they responded, "Down with the dynasty of David. We have no interest in the son of Jesse." Back to your homes, O Israel. Look out for your own house, O David. He rejected them. And the nation divided. The nation split. Civil war ensues. Trust is broken. The country's divided. The country is weak. They're waging war against each other. And it's just a matter of years before invading armies take advantage of their weakened states and leads everyone into slavery and destruction. Rehoboam illustrates that detours determine the direction of our days. And we've got to expect the challenges, but we must make wise choices. So how do we avoid the mistake that Rehoboam made? How do we know in the chaos and the confusion of our detour that we're making the best choice for all the people around us who we love? I think Rehoboam knew the answer. He just forgot it. It's actually wisdom from his dad. In Proverbs 15, Solomon says, "Fear of the Lord teaches wisdom." Fear of the Lord teaches wisdom. And this isn't a fear of like cowering, scared. This is a fear of reverence, a fear of honor, a fear of respect. The way that I've been thinking about it is I have electricity in my home, which I hope all of you do as well. And I love having electricity. I love what it provides me. I love the comfort it provides me. I love the security it provides me. I love the way it makes my life better. But I respect it and I honor it. And I know it's more powerful than me. And I don't go shoving forks in the outlets because I know it's going to get me in trouble. Like there's a way to respect this thing that I now get to enjoy. God is kind of like that. He says, I'm here to make your life better. I'm here to help you. I'm here to comfort you. I'm here to provide for you. I'm here to give you security and a hope. But I need you to honor the way that I work. I need you to honor the way that I say life functions best. I need you to honor the way that I say is best and trust me in that. And so how do we know what wisdom is? Man, we know what wisdom is by first just doing what God said. When we got to make a choice and we need wisdom, we just got to do what God's already said. What's he already told us? If it's in the Bible, we don't need to ask him again. And I know for some of us, the Bible's really confusing and it's scary, and how do I read this? And I know for me, there's been tons of times that I'm like, I have no clue what I'm reading right now. And so we offer a class on the third weekend of every month. It is amazing. It's called Bible Discovery. And so on the third weekend of every month at every campus is Bible Discovery. And it's just a great way to figure out, how do I read the Bible? How do I find God's wisdom in these words? How do I be able to apply this to my life? If you don't want to wait till the third weekend, at every campus at the Next Steps area, there's a team waiting to help you figure out how to download the YouVersion app on your phone. And the YouVersion app is a great way to read the Bible daily on your phone. And if you're super busy, it will even read it to you on your morning commute. There's times that I'm just like, my morning goes crazy and my kids are running around and I'm like, I have to listen to it in the car because I want that time of putting it in my life. Or if you don't want to do that, just whatever day of the month it is, read the proverb that is that number. So like Monday's the 24th, so read Proverbs 24. Just whatever you do, start putting the wisdom that God has already given us into your life. And then the second thing is put that wisdom in your life, but then check yourself to make sure you're understanding it correctly. So do what God says, but then also do what godly people say. There's something about finding the godly people in your life, the people that you look at and you're like, I want to talk like them, look like them, act like them, marry like them, love like them, fight like them. When you look at them and you're like, if I end up like them, I'm happy. And I think that would honor God. Go to those people. Go to those people and say, hey, I've been trying to understand what God says about this, but can you help me navigate this as well? There's something so humbling about opening up your hands and saying, I don't know the best choice right now, and so I need help. Help me navigate if I go back to them or stay away. Help me navigate if I say yes to this opportunity or no. Help me navigate if I buy or sell. Help me navigate if this is forgiving or being a doormat. Help me navigate if I stay the course or if I need to drastically change. Help me navigate all of these medical choices. Help me navigate how I plan for the future. Help me navigate because I want to navigate this detour well because the people around me matter. And if detours determine the direction of our days, man, I want to detour well because I love the people around me. So Rehoboam teaches us. Detours determine the direction of our days. So expect the challenge. Expect to have to make wise choices. And then the last thing that he teaches us is remember that you've got to courageously cling to the people that matter most. Courageously cling to what matters most. See, Rehoboam lost sight of what mattered most in his life. He lost sight of the kingdom. He lost sight of the people. He lost sight of his legacy. He lost sight of doing what was best in the long run to prove himself in the short run. He lost sight of it. And when you lose sight of who matters most in a detour, then you might lose who matters most in a detour. When you lose sight of who matters most in a detour, then you might lose who matters most in a detour. And if I'm really honest, for myself right now, this is the one that God's been reminding me of the most. See, for me, in the midst of my current detour, the challenge of it, oh man, it excites me. And I'm like, let's giddy up and face this thing. And I am blessed to have godly people around me. My wife is godly, my teammates are godly, my bosses are godly, and I'm just privileged there. And I see that as a gift. But no one other than me can cling to the people who are most important to me. My bosses can't remind me or make me. My wife can't make me. Only I can cling to what matters most. Only I can keep my thoughts on what matters most. And only I can keep my attention on what matters most. Only I am responsible for staying focused on what matters most. And my biggest fear is that my passion will outpace my priorities, and then all of a sudden I will lose the people who matter most to me because I ran too fast for them, or I got too distracted from them, or I did too many good things and it cost me the best things. And so for me, I had a friend years ago, it was a wise man who sat me down. I was in the midst of some of these changes, and he saw my tendencies, and he saw my ADHD kicking in and forgetting what really mattered in life, and he pulled out a napkin, and he wrote down on the napkin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he said, Matt, you need to clearly know who are the 5 most important people in your life. You need to clearly know beyond a shadow of a doubt who the 5 most important people are in your life. And then you need to viciously cling to them in your detour. And so he was like, whatever's number 1, put it on your calendar. Whoever's number 2, put it on your calendar. Whoever's number 3, put it on your calendar. Whoever's number 4, put it on your calendar. And then honor those appointments. And so date nights, those are non-negotiable. Wrestling time with your boys, non-negotiable. Time with your family, non-negotiable. Time within work, make sure you honor what you're paid to do. Like he told me, he's like, map it out and honor it within those 5 priorities. And so while I was sitting with him, I was like, all right, so being a pastor, I guess number 1 is God, and then number 2 is my wife, and then number 3 is my boys, and number 4 is friends and family, and then number 5 would be LCBC. And he said something that totally threw me for a curveball. He looked at me and he goes, that's cute. So God's number 1, that's good. Does that mean God's not a part of your marriage? No, he's a part of it. Oh, is God part of your kids? Yeah, I hope so. Is God a part of your friends? Yeah. And he goes, why did you compartmentalize God as one thing? And he goes, God's pervasive in all of them. He goes, so take God off the list. God's in all of it. And don't put him on a shelf over here to feel like you've done your God check mark for the day. God's in all of it. And he goes, so rewrite your list. And I was like, well, I guess Pearl's number 1, and then my boys, and then my friends and family, and then my church, and then I'll find a new hobby for number 5. And he's like, nope. And I'm like, it sounds like you got something you want me to do. Why don't you tell me the correct answer? And he leaned back, and he looked at me, and he goes, what is the best thing you can give your wife? Roses? The best you. What's the best thing you can give your boys? Disney? The best you. Best thing you can give your friends and family? The best you. Best thing you can give your church? The best you. And he made me write Matt on number 1. And that was so hard. But what I realized is if I truly love my wife, I want to bring the best me to my wife. And if I truly love my boys, I want to bring the best me to my boys and the best marriage to my boys. And if I really love my friends, I want to bring the best me to my friends and the best family to my friends and the best marriage to my friends. And if I really love my church, I want to bring the best friends and the best family and the best marriage to my church. And I realized that I was not protecting me to bring the best me to those that I love the most. And so he had me write down how much sleep do I need, starting my day with Jesus. And I start my day with Jesus not because he's a cosmic manager waiting for me to check in. I start with Jesus because I'm naturally a jerk, and he helps me not be as jerky as I want to be. Like Jesus changes me, and I need him. I then realize that there's seasons that I got to block out counseling because my head gets crazy, and I just need someone to help me figure out my thoughts. I realize that I also block out time for going to the gym because there's something about throwing weights that just gets frustration and anxiety out of me, and it's healthy for me to do that. I realize that when I bring the best me to my marriage, I'm truly serving my marriage. When I bring the best me to my boys, I'm serving my family. When I bring the best me to my friends, I'm serving them. And when I bring the best me to my church, I'm being the most faithful to my church. Detours determine the direction of our days. So expect a challenge. Expect to have to make great choices and wise choices. And expect to have to cling to what matters most. Because how we detour determines the direction of our days. There was a song I was introduced to a couple of weeks ago, and it's really became a prayer for me. Because there's moments that I don't know if I've got the courage to move forward. And there's moments that I don't know the right choice to make in a decision. And there's moments that I don't have clarity on what matters most. And the song just speaks of Spirit, lead me. And so we're actually going to end by singing this as a prayer over all of us. And my hope is that as you are sitting here and you are thinking about your detour, and you're thinking about whether you need courage, or whether you need wisdom, or whether you need clarity, whether you need to be able to face the challenge, or make the choice, or cling to what matters most, that you will simply say, Spirit, lead me. Lead me to be courageous to keep facing the challenge. Lead me to have the wisdom to know what is the right choice. Lead me to have clarity around who matters most. Spirit, lead me. Because I want to detour well. Because I love the people in my life. And detours determine the direction of our days. And when I'm out of this detour, I want the people who matter most to be the most important part of my life. Let's pray. Jesus, we pause. And I know that many of us are in detours right now that are just overwhelming and scary. And we don't know how to keep moving through them. We don't know how to have the courage to keep facing the challenges. And we don't know how to have wisdom to answer all the questions that are coming in. And we don't know how to have the clarity to know what really matters in this season and who really matters. And so, God, we just open up our hands right now. And we say, Spirit, lead me. Spirit, lead me to have the courage to stay in the fight. Spirit, lead me to have the wisdom to know what's the right choice to make. Spirit, lead me to have clarity around who matters most, because we want to detour well, because we love the people in our life. And so Spirit, lead, and help us to fully follow you, trusting you through the ups and downs of life. So Jesus, it's in your name we pray, and we trust you. Amen.